Now, presenting his medium-term budget speech, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan said that more funds will be channeled into a number of priority infrastructure projects in the transport, communications and energy sectors. However, a new concern that seems to be emerging is that despite the funding, projects are not actually getting off the ground. Joining us now to share his views is JP Lawaskachny, a public-private partnership specialist at Deloitte. JP, thanks for your time today. But looking at, as mentioned just a few moments ago there, that these projects are not getting off the ground. We know that we have the National Development Plan in place. Transnet as well is said to also spend, or rather a large sum of money with regard to infrastructure spending. But what happens to be the delay?
I think there's just a delay in getting from the project conceptualization to actually get into procurement. So I think the government has identified a lot of projects. I mean, the NDP is quite specific. If you look at the strategic infrastructure programs, a lot of things are on there, but a lot of them are still in idea space. And I think it's that shift getting from ideas through to a pre-feasibility study, into a proper feasibility study and into construction is the delay. So I think it's from concept to a real bankable project that is where the problem lies.
And the trust. You know, we've had a construction industry that is getting pilloried even by Koki Koiman just a few moments ago, saying that the construction industry colluded and they're bad boys. If you're a government, do you give them any work?
Who else is going to build it?
I agree with you. I think that it's been horribly overdone, but it's not you and I who make these decisions. It's government who makes the decision on whether or not to allow the local construction industry to have a share of this 4 trillion rand cake. And I'm asking, is that not perhaps one of the reasons, this lack of trust?
Possibly, and I think the Competition Commission has been, I think the work that they've done was necessary. I think there was a lot of always allegations floating around. I think there was a lot of talk before the World Cup. You know, people were very busy between the World Cup, between the our famous Gauteng highways, the Gautrain. There was a lot of business going on in construction, so people were busy. So jobs, I'm not saying weren't appreciated, but there was a lot of comfortable work with good margins. So I think they became fat. And I think it was important to have done that investigation and to prove what I think a lot of people suspected. But at the end, that is the construction industry in South Africa. We haven't really had a lot of overseas contractors being involved in the country, not like the rest of Africa. We've had major plays by Chinese contractors, by a lot of Brazilian firms, not just in the former Portuguese colonies. But the South African industry has been relatively self-contained. And possibly the question of trust is out there, but I think that's why the Competition Commission was an important thing to go through. I did see Koki debating, you know, did they find them enough? That's a different debate.
Well, Gugu likes the big numbers, you see. She likes these billions and billions of funds. You know how much money 1.5 billion rand is? My goodness. Wipes out a lot of profits for quite a long time.
Yeah, I think especially at the moment when the construction industry is suffering. But I mean, as you said, they have banked a lot of the big numbers.
Well, they've distributed to shareholders. And you can't go back to shareholders and say, hey, now give us your money from the collusion. But JP, the real story here was that we did it before 2010. The government said, my goodness, all these comments about moving the FIFA World Cup to Australia, we need to take it seriously, we need to build our stadiums, and we did it 3 months ahead of time. Now we say we need to get the infrastructure in the ground, but we're stuttering. What's the difference? Where's the hold-up? Are we not taking it seriously enough?
I think possibly. I think everyone knows about the demand. I mean, the need is there, the demand's there, the planning is there. So all of those big picture things that government needs to put in place has been put in place. But as you said, it's now, what's the driver? I think the World Cup was wonderful because there was a real driver, unification. Part of it is proving to the rest of the world that we didn't need a plan B and it wasn't going to go back to Germany, which is what everyone's saying about Brazil at the moment. What's plan B? Is South Africa now plan B? And I suppose that's also helping them focus the mind, because you can't afford to fail on something that big because there's a deadline that it will start. And I think with a lot of the other infrastructure projects, is not a specific deadline. It has to be done by this day. And I think maybe that distracts people or doesn't force people to focus on what is the day it must start. And we don't have that at the moment.
So let's get the Olympics maybe, hey? Motivation force. But with the infrastructure spend naturally comes the need for revenue with regard to that. I understand that there's already pressures with regard to tax revenue in the country. Our bond inflows are not so solid and we're losing our foreign investment appeal. Where's this money going to come from and will it be enough?
I think the revenue one is a big challenge. I think the most depressing sign I see on the highway is SARS sign in Midrand. It says, 3.5 million people have paid their taxes. That's horrible. I mean, out of 52 million people, if that's all the people that are paying tax, and actually I think 80% or something live in Gauteng, that's a very low tax base. Granted, it's not corporate, but if that's individual taxpayers, that is a problem.
It's a silly marketing campaign because we all pay through the fuel levy, we all pay VAT. It's just the income tax base, which is, I think they need to fire the aid agency. But because you think,
you can discuss
fire the aid agency. I mean, I'm getting as bad as you.
Oh,
Find them more in construction.
Thanks, Alec. I think I'll take over now before you get us into trouble. But just with regard to public-private partnerships, are we seeing enough of that going forward?
Yes, in certain sectors. The whole renewable energy independent power program is a public-private partnership process. That has been incredibly successful. I mean, we have international investors, we've had a lot of growth. I think that's quite frankly going to be keeping the construction industry ticking over for quite a while. A lot of the consulting engineering firms involved. So yes, as a PPP, that particular program has been incredibly successful. Some of the other big things, hospitals, we've been talking about Chris Hani Baragwana for years.
Some of the smaller hospitals are doing okay. I know the little one in Newcastle, for instance, which was a provincial hospital, which is now a Mediclinic, are running it far better than in the past.
There's been a lot of debate about what should the private sector's role be in hospitals. I mean, we have a whole private sector healthcare industry that does really well. I think it's cheaper staying in 5-star hotels than in intensive care. But that has not been translated into government effectiveness. I mean, so there are 5 or 6 hospitals identified for public-private partnerships: Chris Hani Baragwana, George McCurry, Limpopo, New King Edward, and of course I'm going to forget the other one that I quoted. But that program's just dragging, and I think because government's not quite sure how to involve the private sector.
JP, before we let you go, why does it seem as though this infrastructure development we see a lot of it taking place in the special hubs? We know Sandton, Alec mentioned just a moment ago that there are expansion projects with regard to the Sandton area. Sasol is moving its offices here. It seems as though Sandton and Rosebank, where the areas are already congested, why not move out into other areas? We know the Gautrain is going as far as Boksburg, coming to the south in Naledi as well as in Mamelodi and Pretoria. Why aren't we seeing more development areas?
Well, I think if you look at Midrand, a lot of developments happening there. Waterfall Office Park, I mean, it's creating a new space and new growth areas. But these are decided by just pure private sector supply and demand with no government interference or no tacit interference. Might be ineffectiveness, but through regular bureaucracy. But it's been driven by the private sector.
And you get it wrong, you go bust. I mean, how good is that? You get it wrong in government, you say, oh, oops, sorry, wrong mistake. I'm going back to do something else tonight. Maybe not allowed wine anymore in government. You remember, they've cut that. Province cut that out. Yeah. But if you make mistakes in the private sector, you pay heavily for it. If you make mistakes in government,
I think one of the best industries for making mistakes and being fined is the football industry. Those managers come and go with performance. And I think that's almost the direct responsibility to a team's performance.
The free market at work. Well, it's been terrific talking with you. Thank you, JP, for coming through today. That was JP Labuskaghni.